So that's part of my journey. So we'll just quickly go through this. Now, this could be a little bit more detailed. I'm going to try and give you as much context as I can. Can anyone tell me what that's a picture of? Well, obviously it's Can anyone tell me what the structure is?
Houses joined together.
Okay. Oh, wow, that's interesting. All right. This is Community Matakaka. This is one of the last Pariwanga o Io of Tainui and Mani. This construction here may seem a little bit unusual, but it's not. It's too long. Those doors, each door faces the 4 cardinal directions. And many of you understand that the 4 cardinal directions are really important to tell in Te Ao Moana. Okay, we're going to get to this a little bit later because I'm going to show you some of my latest research about the Mere Takahara. Alright, so I'm kaha nui rangatari tūwhare tō ngā te rumupani tūboia no kara, etc. So I know this because I've done my whakapapa and I've got my whakapapa down on paper. So I used to only affiliate with Pahanuri and Tūboi, but it just opens right up. I've already told you this. I am my husband and married to my wife Neska, who is Ngāti Mahanga and Ngāti Waitarangi of Tauranga and Tūwhare Tō. I'm a researcher and soon to be author, and I'm writing a book. What I'm going through here is really, really brief. I would wish I had a week to appear, but I don't. So I'm going to try and give you as much context as possible. But there's a lot of detail that I'm going to skip over because I don't have the time to go through it. Now I want to have a sign of hands of how many of you believe that Io is Tuturu Māori, and how many of you believe that Io is inspired or influenced by the Bible?
So if we put up a hand, which one are we going to be?
Yeah, alright.
Well, is it, we believe he's Tuturu Māori, he came over on the waka?
Okay, show of hands.
Show of hands.
Want to sit on the fence?
You can sit on the fence.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, are there any academics in the room? Show of hands. Any academics?
What is an academic?
An academic is someone who's got a degree.
I'm a master's student.
You're a master's student. What do you study?
Architecture.
Architecture. Okay. So, is there a Māori element in your specialisation?
Yeah, my piece is
Whakapai. Okay. Cool. Well, a lot of architects, food architects, have done a bit of work on Te Reo Matakaka, but I've got a lot of experience.
I've got a question. If they don't believe that Io Matakuri is being Māori, what do they, is it the name or is it just what?
Yeah, well, we'll get into
What do they believe?
Okay, so let's just...
Big Bang Theory.
Well, let's look at the name. When you go to the Bible, what's Jehovah's name? Yahweh. Right, Yahweh. And so when they look at the name Io, they say, hey, that's just a borrowing from the Bible.
So is it the name that's a problem as opposed to the fact that there's a supreme being?
No, it's to do with...
Just the concept of one.
It's the monotheism that they can't get their head around. That's part of it, the monotheism. Because when the Pākehā started to collect kōrero off the Māori were telling them about Rangi and Papa and all the atua.
Yeah.
It was not until the mid-1800s and then later in the 1900s when this stuff became published about Io that everyone started to question why did it take so long for this kōrero to come out about Io, the supreme being, a monotheistic conception that runs counter to this whole idea of polytheism. What's going on? How come it wasn't recorded way back in, say, the 1820s? Okay, so we'll talk a little bit about that. So the name Ihaua and Io, yes, that's problematic for a lot of these scholars and some Māori. Now, there are two houses of learning. One house of learning is the university. The other house of learning is the whariwānanga. These individuals over here have gone through the ancient whariwānanga. This gentleman here and this gentleman here went through a modified whariwānanga. What happened was that the whariwānanga went through a lot of changes. When tohunga were dying or becoming Christian, they weren't passing on the mautauranga, and they weren't running whariwānanga. What happened was the tribes, a lot of tribes noticed that mautauranga Māori was getting lost, and so what they did is they put together ad hoc whariwānanga. Do you know what I mean by ad hoc? Okay, we've got a problem, our youth aren't learning this stuff, we need to set up a whariwānanga and we need to set it up really fast. Okay, and then what happened was, in many instances, where you would normally have 3 tohunga teaching the mautauranga, you only had 1 tohunga, and he was old and he was losing his memory. So these whariwānanga, I call them whariwānanga or transitionary whariwānanga or whariwānanga of last resort, weren't running at 100% capacity. Okay, so Te Tanitua, does anyone know who that is? And we went through these modified whariwānanga. Okay, they weren't the full Monty. Okay, they didn't have all the knowledge, but they had enough. Now, you'll hear Alison Best say that, and he is actually quite correct, I double checked. I don't just accept what Alison Best says. He says that Iotanga was left for only the highest levels of the whariwānanga. That is correct up to a point. When the whariwānanga changed, Iotanga was taught at the lower levels. Because if you don't teach it at the lower levels, you're going to lose it, because it takes up to 25 years to become a fully fledged tohunga, or fully fledged expert in this material. Now consider this. If we were to gather all the published kōrero that there is in Te Ao Māori, and we were to gather it and we were to collate it and we were to put into a curriculum, that wouldn't amount to 50% of what was taught in the whariwānanga. My guess is, and this is an estimate, my guess is that most of the knowledge is still in people's homes in their whakapapa books or in their memory. So when you go online, you do your Google search, and we all do that. When you do your Google search and thinking you come up with all this information, you're like, wow, this is amazing. That is only 50% of what's available. Most of it, and I've found by personal experience, is still undiscovered, or it's put away in a box. I'll give you one example. There's a gentleman down in the East Coast called, his name is Reginald Pewhairanga. Does anyone know Reginald Pewhairanga? Okay. He received spiritual inspiration that there was a trunk in an old shearing shed. And he needed to go and find this trunk because there was a lot of books in there, whakapapa books and books on kōrero. He followed that prompting and indeed he found it. The shed didn't belong to him, it belonged to someone else, some part of the farm. And he discovered all these books. He opened it up and it was a trunk full of whakapapa books and kōrero of Ngāti Parae. Now, if he didn't act on that prompting, those books will still remain undiscovered. Okay? So what I'm saying is it's an example that there's tons of mautauranga Māori yet to be discovered. I'm going to share some of that with you today. Just a quick rundown of who this is. This is Te Ao Katoa. Can anyone tell me who this is? He was one of the last priests of Io of Tainui. He's one of the head tohunga for Tāwhiu. This is Tūtakanga from Tūhoa. If you've read Children of the Mist from Alison Best, you know who this is. He's one of Alison's best main informants. This is Whakaholo Juri. This gentleman here is a member of the church, and he's the man. If it wasn't for this gentleman here, we would know very little about Io. Okay? Very little. This is Rui Maniapoto. He was also a holder of Iotanga. This is Tiwai Paraone. I visited his gravesite recently. He was also one of the last priests of Io of the Tainui Whariwānanga. This is Apuro Kumuro, who also joined the church. He was baptised in 1886. He was baptised in 1883. I've got a letter that he wrote to a mission president that states that he was baptised in 1883. If you go online, it says he was baptised in 1900. It's not correct. This is Takari Te Ua, Witu the Whariwānanga, this is Wipiri. Wipiri has some interesting kōrero o Rio. And this is my wife's ancestor, Tōpia Tūroa for Whanganui. Some of these academics you might not know this gentleman here is from the United States. His specialisation is religion. This is David R. Simmons, a friend of Hato here. This is James R. Cox. He's a professor from Scotland. He's a friend of mine. This is Pritz Johansson. Jay Pritz Johansson. You can't quite see his whole name there. He's an anthropologist from Denmark, and he's writing about Māori. He's probably never stepped foot in a marae before. This is Jeffrey Pakoroa Holman, Ramanui Walker, Margaret Orwell, another anthropologist who now passed on, Ari Makaire, Sir Peter Buck, he's obviously quite well known in Hirani Mokomi. This group here says that Eo is not tutu. And these people here, these Māori, our Māori elders, Mōhio, have told other Māori, you're silly to believe in a supreme being because he's not tutu to Māori. Now, their kaupapa and their kōrero, the whakaaro comes from the works of these white scholars. So they're taking the kōrero of the white scholars. Sorry, am I offending anyone by saying that?
A little bit.
A little bit? A little?
Yeah,
Okay,
because
can I
you're
say part?
assuming, because you're making an assumption that that's what motivates them to say what they do, whereas they might be basing it on a whole different structure or process or logic. Like, how do you know why they say that?
Okay.
How do you know that they say it because Toby told them to? That they didn't work that out by themselves.
That's great. What you do is you look at their papers and you see who they're quoting.
Okay.
You look at their notes, and their notes and what they're quoting is this, definitely this gentleman here. This gentleman, he's not that well known, but his scholarship is the latest scholarship. His book was only published last year on Hill. Sir Peter Buck, unfortunately Peter Buck was quoting Reverend Williams' paper in 1935 on the Marawiwi. He was a believer in Eel, his Tutu Māori, when he wrote his first book, which was Vikings of the Sunrise. Okay, but then when he came out with his other book, which is The Coming of the Māori, he changed his position. When you look at his arguments in his second book, they're actually quite weak, but yet Peter Buck is quoted quite a bit, very, very often. Hirani Mokomi said he just can't get his head around the Supreme Being. He just can't get his head around it. Okay? So there's two houses of learning that so here's the thing. When our ancestors come out with whakapapa, we say tika. When they talk about ranganui and papa tūnuku, we say tika. But as soon as they say, Eo, the Supreme Being, we say, I don't know. It sounds too Christian, it's monotheistic. I think you borrowed that from the Bible. We don't want that. A lot of Māori are like that. I'm not saying you are in this room, but a lot of Māori are like that. Let's believe our ancestors before we believe these jokers over here. But it isn't happening. People believe these jokers over here above our ancestors.
But do you think the tide's turning on that, Carl? I mean, the younger generation coming through?
Oh, okay. So the younger generation, the undertakers are very confused. Yeah. But when they hit the university, boom, they say, no, Eels not tutu. That's the issue when they hit university. But when they don't go to university, yeah, of course, Eel is the supreme being. Okay, Whakahoro jury. Just a little bit about him. Dr. Simmons is right about him. He was trained in the Wananga. Well, Dr. Simmons doesn't say in his his piece in the New Zealand Dictionary of Biography, if I got that right. What he doesn't say is Whakahoro was actually trained through the ancient Wananga, and later on Whakahoro was asked to write down the kōrero from the whare Wananga in a book, along with 6 or 8 others. Whakahoro was trained at Amohi Mātorohanga, Piripi o Huhu, and Paratini o Whare. Do you know who this is? No? Okay. A very, very, very important man. He reached the six of the 7 levels of the whare Wananga. Now, the reason why he didn't reach the 7th level is because he was asked to makutu his third daughter. I only just found that out 2 weeks ago. And so he didn't reach the 7th level. After that, one of his descendants, who is the wisdom holder of his kōrero, said to me, after that he joined the Hato and became a Christian. He said, no, that's not for me. Became a Christian, and then later on in the late 1880s became a member of the church. He provided the most thorough disclosure of Iotanga of any informant to date. No one has come out with as much Iotanga as he has. He has 125 books in the Turnbull Library that still need to be mined. People need to sit down and go through this stuff. So what Alston Best, because he was one of Alston's best main informants, his main informant. He was also Percy Smith's main informant. And if you ever study this kōrero, you have to pick up the book, The Law of the Whare Wananga, and you have to read Alston Best's material as well, together, okay, to get a full story. However, Alston Best didn't collect everything he could of Whakahoro. I've just discovered something new. Whakahoro has shared a lot of kupu, esoteric kupu. Do you know what I mean by esoteric? Hidden. Okay, not for the masses. Mysterious. Tapu, very sacred. He shared all this kupu with Alston Best, and Alston Best wrote 2 books, a dictionary of the kupu that this man gave him. When you read the kupu, you think, oh heck, I know what that word is. I just get William's dictionary, and they're not the same. Because there was a what they call a sacerdotal, or a deeper understanding of some of the kupu. And what Williams has, actually Williams refused to include Whakahoro's kupu in his dictionary. Okay, so that's a little bit about him. Are you with me so far? Yes. If I'm getting boring and so monotone, just tell me. Okay? Okay, so Percy Smith. Percy Smith is, this is what I love about the early ethnologists, is that without them, we would have lost so much. They were curious. Yes, they had a colonial mindset. But without them, and their curiosity and their tenacity to gather kōrero, because a lot of them, their motivation was the Māori people are going to die off, let's collect this before they die off. Without them, we stuffed really.
Phil, can I ask one question of these people? Can you put your hands up if you've studied those books up on the screen, please? Have you read those books?
Seeing a bit.
That's a great example. So three of you put up your hand. The scholars who are what I call anti-Eo, say, well, hang on, the reason why everyone knows about Eo is because of this book that was published in 1913, and they're just stealing stuff from here. But this book was never a bestseller. It was never a bestseller, and Māori didn't read it. This book was published by the Journal of the Polynesian Society, and most members of that society were the upper crust. They were illiterate, they were upper crust, they're either blue collar or white collar. Very few Māori read the Journal of the Polynesian Society and knew nothing about this book. So this is not the source of why Iotanga was dispersed out throughout the motu, but scholars will try and convince our rangatai that's what happened.
Phil, one more question. Anyone got a copy of this book at home? Put your hand up.
You can get it free online. Get a copy online for free. Now, this is my papakoina and taho raiti. This has got to be one of the there was a hui that was held here in 1907 in Taharoiti. For those of you who are Latter-day Saints, you understand that Matthew Cowley translated the Book of Mormon in Taharoiti. Well, this hui was held there in 1907. And this hui is quite special. The whole impetus of putting this hui together was we're losing the knowledge. They put out a pānui throughout the Wairarapa, Iotanga, throughout Raukawa, the East Coast, and said, everybody bring all your knowledge and all your books to this hui. And they did that without hesitation. And I'd love for that to happen again. To reset the knowledge, because the knowledge it's gone off the tracks a little bit. With Neo Tohungatanga, and I'll explain that. So they brought all their books. They gathered 80 kgs worth of books. Whakapapa books and books with kōrero. 80 kgs. That's quite hefty. Now, so what they did is they set up this committee and they say, all right, bring your stuff and we want you to stand up and we want you to give us your kōrero. They set up a panel of experts and my ancestor, this ancestor here, Tākana Ti Rangia, Tākana Te Rangia Mauriora was I'm the director senior of him, is part of that committee. What they did was they say, okay, you stand up and you talk and we will vet whether your kōrero is tika or teka. Okay? So, this took months. And I wish this would happen again. This took months.
Matua, can I just ask, how many of you have heard of the Tāne Nui Arangi Committee before, please? Ngāringa ki runga.
Okay, now let me tell you why this is so special, this committee. This committee is special because it was from this committee that Iotanga came out, which was this book here. This book here. So that's one of the results of this committee. Okay, now, so what they would do is, this is the committee of Tupai, which was another committee that was running consecutively with the Tāne Nui Rangi Committee. And what they would do is, when you talk and you give your whakapapa books and the experts look at it, if it's tika, they stamped it, boom. If it wasn't stamped. Okay, here's something interesting. This is just a side note. I was going through some old whakapapa books of Rawari Kama from the Iotanga. He had recorded some of the temple work that was done by my ancestor at Salt Lake City. For those of you who are not Latter-day Saints, I'll tell you after. We'll come up and ask me a little bit about what that means. But he recorded some of my ancestors' ancestors, and I discovered one of my ancestors' name is. Can you read that? Tōhunga. Extremely rare name. Tōhunga. My ancestor, Tākana Te Rangia Mauriora, also had or held the kōrero io. Okay? And he was a descendant, or his father was Ihaka Te Rangia Mauriora, the chief of Ngāti Te Kapiwārangi. Okay, now, in 1907, just as this committee was getting together, two Nui Arangi Brown set out a pānui or a press release, which is a local paper, and told the local news, this is what we're doing, we're gathering kōrero, and we want everyone to know. Why this is important is, we'll get to that a little bit later. Now, David Simmons, I actually like him. I think he's a white tohunga, and I said that to him over the phone. Brother, I think you're a white tohunga. Now, that designation was given to Edward Manning, Frederick Manning, right, from Ngāpuhi people. So it was considered white tohunga, and also C.E. Nelson.
No, it's just Frederick Manning.
Now, we're going to look at some criticisms from these scholars. This comes from his seminal article in the Journal of Polynesian the Journal of the Polynesian Society. Yes. Let me read this quote from his critique on Whakahōra's material. None of the material in chapter 2 is found in the extant copies of the Tāne Nuirangi manuscripts. Manuscript number 50 and manuscript number 51. It derives entirely from the Smith's copy of manuscript number 12, a book owned by Whakaworo and credited to Mātarahanga. Essentially what he's saying is, you have to understand that there's no other Māori informant that has been vilified like Whakaworo. And he's had a bad run. But so what he's saying is that in the Law of the Whare, this book here, chapter 2 was not stamped. So what did I say with the kōrero? It's not stamped, it's not tika, it's
Tika.
right. So he's saying it wasn't stamped. Now, in chapter 2, let's have a look. What's in chapter 2? In chapter 2 we have the names of Eo. If chapter 2 is not tika and wasn't apparently stamped by the Tāne Nuirangi Committee, boom, you've just got rid of Iotanga. Full stop, boom. These names are made up. Right? So his whakaaro is, well, the only way that you can tell whether kōrero from Māori is tutu and tika is that it has to be vetted by knowledgeable individuals of their tribe who are known to have knowledge. Okay? And so he's applied that and he's overlaid it with his interpretation of not finding a stamped copy of chapter 2. It says, boom, it's Iotanga, you're yawning. You know what that means? 10 press-ups. So if you do away with chapter 2, Iotanga is...
Was that stamped by the committee?
No.
No.
He found no evidence of that. He found no evidence of it. Okay. However, I showed you that press release. That book, The Law of the Whare, was published in 1913. This is the press release I showed you from 2 Nuirangi Brown that was sent or published in 1907. Okay, a full 6 years before the Law of the Whare. Here's what he says. The most important part of the deliberations of this meeting is to secure an accurate genealogical tree of each Māori from beginning with Iotanga. They were getting together to talk about Eo. This is one of the sacred names in that list that was in chapter 2. Eo Matangaro. Dr. Simmons got his information wrong. But people are still quoting him. And say, oh, well, you got to read David, you got to read Dr. Simmons. You know, oh, it's whakahoro, oh, this is crazy. You got it totally wrong. Now, another criticism levelled at whakahoro is that whakahoro introduced 2 more heavens when there's only 10 heavens. In our cosmological thinking and the cosmological kōrero of many tribes, there are only 10 heavens. Can you concur? Do you concur with me? 10 heavens. Mātua? Right? Okay. So they say, well, this whakahoro, he's playing around with the kōrero here and he's just introduced two more heavens. That's not tū Māori. We can't trust whakahoro. Mohi Mātaurahanga, he's introduced 2 more heavens. This is rubbish. Totally rubbish. We were brought up with 10 heavens. It doesn't matter whether it's 10 or 12. Now, this kōrero comes from Aperahama Tamiwaho. He presented kōrero at another committee in 1909 in Tapawai, in Masterton. He had two lists of 12 heavens that are independent of whakahoro's material. So whakahoro wasn't the only tohunga to bring material about the 12 heavens of Eo. And yet scholars say that he was the only one that brought that material because we got the Law of the Whare, and I guess that everyone else's kōrero was rubbish, but they chose his because his was the most elaborate. But we can't trust whakahoro, so let's just do away with the book. There are two lists of the heavens. Ngā rangi, ngā huru, ngā rua, the 12 heavens. Then we have the names of Eo here. What I love about this list is that they're not quite the same as whakahoro.